two people on the line. Jerry Acuff, welcome to PRS 339. Welcome to Bentley University. We got Nick Richardson. If your legs aren't shaking in a sales call, is there something going on? Is there something wrong?
Hey, my philosophy is if you're not a little bit nervous, then you're probably not doing something that matters.
Right? Mr. Acuff, if you're not nervous about a sales call, is there something going on that we don't know? He's on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
You don't have to be smart to shop here. No, I think the nerves are really engendered by wanting to do well. And so I think every time, like when I speak in front of a large group or a small group, I always get nervous. And I say, if I don't get nervous, I get worried. So I think it's like I played college football. I got nervous until somebody knocked the hell out of me. And then I wasn't nervous anymore. So I think it's the same thing in sales. Once you encounter the customer, the nerves, begin to go away, especially if you get comfortable having a conversation.
So nerves happens to me all the time, and it's going to happen as we go on. And as we build, and as you guys have to do your final calibration, that's normal. Not nervous, that's normal. So a little bit more feedback. What else did you guys take out of this call? Yeah.
I mean, I know you were nervous, but your body language was very open and you used your hands really well. So I thought that was really great.
From my perspective, I couldn't even tell that you were nervous. You were calm and collected from my perspective. And then you also gave really good pauses in your dialogue.
All right.
Yeah, I was also just gonna say I thought that was like the best one in terms of like tone, voice pitch, like how slow he spoke, how he used his body.
So tone, voice pitch, how you use your body.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I like the relationship building, even just like something stupid as talking about if you're something playing basketball, like it builds that relationship, kind of elaborates on just talking about business.
Well, it also helps talking about something other than business, right? It doesn't always have to be about business. It's connection. It's connections, right? It's not always about that. How do you get your foot in the door? How then do you talk about business? Yeah.
Like how towards the end, he wasn't only trying to sell something, but trying to be more of like a hand of help, a helping hand for their whole company, which is something you definitely want to do when you're trying to pitch a product.
All right. So you nailed something, Pietro, where you said the what was the feedback? It was the tone and what else?
The pitch of his voice and the way he seemed like a friend, just trying to, as he said, give a helping hand. He walked in right away.
So
about his friends.
We had conversational, right? Where you're selling without selling. You can add in, all right, this is what I'm here to do. I'm looking around the room, but I didn't feel from an observer's perspective that you were selling anything for ADP. Right, Nick?
The one thing that I liked that he did was, and I think if he would have positioned it this way, but he offered extra value about the posters and the additional information that he would take something off of the purchaser's hands, right? So the way you kind of position that is, by working with me, here is what we're able to provide, and then lay out the extra value that you specifically. Now, every single ADP rep may do the same thing, but you make it sound like it's you providing that extra value that will take some worry off of their hands. And he was talking about throwing up the posters and adding some things in the office to kind of help the life of the consumer be a little bit easier. At the end of the day, this is what we're all trying to do with what we're selling. We're providing a service that makes their life easier or more enjoyable.
Great feedback. Feedback now from the customer's perspective. How did you feel?
I felt like it was more like not him like pitching the product so much. It was kind of just, I noticed these things about your environment. How can I help you, aid you, instead of like throwing the product in your face?
All right. Huge, right? Huge. From a sales perspective, that's what you want, right? You want to try to get to that point where you're selling without being sold. I'm going to keep you awake. I got you. Only 8. We got a few more here. So, all right, let's do this. We got Jerry Acuff. We got Nick Richardson. Jerry, where are you calling in from?
Rockbridge, Bath, Virginia.
We got Virginia. We got Texas coming into Waltham, which Kyle Schwarber made very popular last night, right? With his Waltham Hawks jersey. So what we're going to do is I'm going to allow my students here. to take a bio break real quick. They're gonna go to the bathroom, and they're gonna come back. What time is it right now? Come back at 7:55. Go out, go take a bathroom break, come back. That's
No, you
it.
did good though.
All right, and then we're gonna get into questions with Jerry and Nick. Oh, thank you. Good work.
Collect these.
No,
No?
just-
All right, cool.
We'll do it. We'll take care of it.
Hey, Nick,
It's so lot, like I'd rather just.
You'd rather just pull off.
Yeah.
From a Zoom, on Zoom. The most important thing in the exercise is that you're getting somebody that has customer interaction. So as long as you can do that, then absolutely. Yeah.
And so we have to hand you a report.
So next week, the 26th, it's due. So it's the midterm paper, it's due next week.
You work so much.
I know, and early too.
So,
I don't like the morning.
Call Joe, talk to Nick, see if there's somebody that they know that they might be able to.
yeah, I asked Joe already and I sent him another email just to check if he had any.
That's gonna be a problem with me.
And
And I haven't heard of it yet.
Yeah, it's like a lot to deal with. I'm sure other people.
I might be able to help you too. So we'll talk about this at the end of the night.
Because I know that others.
Talk people and stuff in the morning.
All right, we'll work on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Order, what I've learned.
That's all, that was my first thing.
There's no, I don't,
Like that was, it was.
You
so-
actually-
I don't do a word
It
count,
was,
so just,
like, it was crazy. I'm like, how the heck?
I would just do it so that way, you know, if you did
Yeah.
three, if you did
So
three sales calls that day and you
So-
were customers, yeah, so detail it
I
out.
would like
What,
catch my
the most
mind.
important thing to me is what did you
And I
learn?
was like, really?
What did you learn?
Wait, there's a time limit. I haven't had it for 6 years. Mine was online.
I would just do it like that. I would say, all right, what did I take out of it? What did I learn? I mean, you know, synopsize it. All right, just as we can.
Slides.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You had Courtney
It's like
Moronco in your class?
interesting, but like. I
Yeah.
can't-
She referred me to Melissa
I
Landry.
love my boss.
Working at Dell. She was
Landry's
in
my
the class.
softball star.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I'm doing she's in Texas at Dell, and I'm doing Zoom with her. For the interview or like the midterm project.
Perfect. Perfect.
Courtney told me to tell you hi, so I had to.
Tell her I said hello. She's one of my all-stars.
Yeah.
It's more about.
Jerry, you recognize that handsome guy on the screen?
It's like at least this.
he's gone.
I'm gonna, hopefully this doesn't embarrass you, but I gotta show one quick clip.
You have a partner or is it?
Show whatever.
But.
As long as it's not my wife talking about what a goofball I am.
Nope. That I can promise you.
And then it like goes back to like the support and then you go post.
Wow.
But I.
Tired of cold calling? Introducing Lucia, the easiest, most accurate.
One of the things that
To it a little bit, right?
I love it.
Your hand up or something.
You need to amend your top 8.
It's actually like, I've never seen a
You
better
didn't even
top.
have, you didn't even have Karl Malone in the top 8.
You think, oh, you think Karl Malone? No.
My question for you is, how are you that you're so, did you go to the game last night?
No.
Give me something. You need a cup of coffee, but out of the.
I already had-
It's on way too much.
I've had too
caffeine
much
right now.
caffeine and I'm shaking, but also exhausted.
I should be.
I'm crashing off with too much caffeine like right now. Like,
I did 3 kids, I just did a whole thing like all day today, evolved checkpoints and
You have like adult
You-
energy, you know?
I don't know how.
Yeah, I don't know how
I
either.
don't know how.
It's
Believe
like
me.
a scary phenomenon that I don't know if I'm ready for yet.
You were just talking about that, waking up early in the morning, like that's like.
I'm up, my wife is an animal. She's up at 4:30 every morning.
Oh my God.
She does this new workout thing. So she's up at 4:30 in the morning. She goes, makes the kids lunches, goes to work. She's a nurse at the elementary school right around the corner. Comes home and now she's doing clinicals. So she's at Milton Hospital doing clinicals until 9:30 at night.
So 4:30, 9:30.
That's a long day. That's a long day.
And she's got to deal with me.
Wait, what time does she go to bed then?
She passed out when she gets home,
Oh,
basically.
yeah.
You guys are both grinders.
Grinders. Gotta do it now. Sleep when I'm dead. All right, let's go, guys. Let's go. Let's rock. I mean,
I can tell you exactly where they are.
I don't wanna know.
They're the vending machine. Punch it in.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Great. Takes a vending machine minutes.
Nobody goes to these Bentley hockey games.
I'm going this weekend.
That place was absolutely awesome for BC the other night and Ohio State. Dukes was, I saw Dukes there. You got to meet the little Z unit. Thank you.
Ohio State one.
Which one?
First one.
I didn't see it. I was there.
No, it's
All right, so as the stragglers get back into the room, as the stragglers come back into the room, I want to welcome formally both Jerry and Nick for spending time tonight. One coming in from Virginia, the other coming in from Texas to talk to you guys and answer your questions about sales, right? So a couple of things to level set before we get started. Number one, I want to turn down these lights real quick. Not all the way down, but just a little bit. Let's see if I can do this. It's gonna reset one. How dark is this gonna become? Oh, let's go maybe two. Let's see. Oh, okay, all right. Oh, all right. We good? Everybody alive? This might be bad news, but I'll try to keep you awake on this one. So a couple of things. Number one. And obviously I'm gonna have Nick and Jerry, they can do a great introduction, but like Amelia, and like we talked about before, I've been teaching this class now for 8 semesters and I've been using the same book every single semester. And every single semester during this chapter in particular, I always see this guy, right? I always see him and he speaks to me. And I always thought, you know, it would be unbelievable if I was to reach out to Jerry Acuff and talk and have him talk to you guys, because it's one thing to read the material from the book, but it's another thing to hear from the men that are on the front lines that are talking about it. One of the quotes of the book says is, in order to think like a buyer, salespeople must understand that the buying process and focus on what the customer is looking for. Remember, this chapter is all about customer and getting into the minds and thinking like the customer. Right? So I looked at that and I said, okay, well, there's a couple of things that this is drawing upon. A couple of things that this is speaking to me about. What is the customer looking for? And Jerry, if I'm wrong, you can certainly have a long time to talk about. They're looking for relationships. Right? They're looking for lasting relationships that they can build upon. So before we go on and before I turn this class over to you guys and over to both Jerry and Nick, let's listen to this real quick.
One of the things that fascinates me more than anything is I can be in a room of 20 salespeople or 200 salespeople, and I can ask them this question. Write down your definition of selling. Now, if I'm in a room with 20 people, how many definitions do you think I get? Yeah, 20. If I'm in a room with 200 people, how many definitions do you think I get? Fairly close to 200. Now, I find that fascinating because selling is truly only two things. And it was really important to me to learn what is selling. In fact, it's the very first chapter in my book, What is Selling? Now, I started my career as a salesperson, and I literally quit my job selling Lipton tea in Jackson, Tennessee, because I couldn't get out of the car and call on customers. You see, my basic personality is introversion. And so I sat in this car and thought, I've got to go in here and sell these people. I got to go in here and convince them to buy my stuff. And I had a hard time doing that because that was in conflict with who I saw myself as a person. I didn't see myself as someone who was pushy and aggressive. Now, then I wound up in the pharmaceutical business, and I listened to a tape one day by a guy named Fred Herman. Now, I'm only back in sales because I think it's PR, and I don't think I got to sell anybody. Now, my boss thought differently, and as I began to learn about selling, I listened to a series of tapes by Fred Herman called Keep It Simple Salesperson, and he changed my life because he taught me the definition of selling. He said, I have two definitions of selling. Number one, selling is teaching. In every successful sale, some education takes place. The customer or prospect learns something that they didn't know before. And so then the question becomes, what do great teachers do? Well, great teachers don't lecture to you all the time. They don't shout at you all the time. They don't let you talk. They make it fun. They make it interactive. They ask you questions that make you think. That's what great salespeople do. And in that process of teaching that way, the customer or prospect uncovers something that they didn't know before. Now, the second thing he said is that selling is not just teaching. Selling is finding out what people want and helping them get it. Wow, that's really interesting. And then he says, there's two things about that you need to understand. Number one, most people don't know what they want, but they think they do. Our job as a salesperson is to get them to see that what they want, we have, if we do have it. Now, the next thing he said is that if what they want, we don't have, what we do have. And I remember distinctly when I listened to that, I said, my gosh, I don't have to sell anybody. All I have to do is go find out what people want. And if what they want, we have, they'll buy. That's why I start every sales call with a client now by saying, I'm not sure that our product or service is right for you. And I won't know that until I understand a little bit about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. And so my definition of selling has been critical to me being successful. And if we don't have the right definition of selling, we'll have the wrong behavior. So selling is teaching. Selling is finding out what people want, helping them get it. And if you do that, watch what happens to your sales. They will soar.
So what do you guys think? What do you think of that? Right? Key tenets of what Jerry was talking about on there. Selling is teaching. Right? Finding out what they want and helping them get it. How about that from an effective selling perspective? Right? We talk about how selling is solving somebody's problem, finding those pain points and solving it. That's exactly what Jerry's talking about. Right? Selling is teaching, and I'll let him expound upon it. So let's do this. We're going to do this a little bit differently tonight, just because Jerry and Nick are in on Zoom, right? So what we're going to do is this. We have questions prepared, right, for both Nick and for Jerry. Typically, we do this. I have the speakers prepare nothing. It's all about their key learning. Both Jerry and Nick. Nick, I know you've done this class several times. It's all about what the students ask and how in-depth they ask the questions, because as we all know, questions are part of sales. So I'll have the students come up so you guys can see them right here in front of the monitor, and they can ask the questions that they want to learn about effective selling. Now, if the question is directed towards Jerry, and Nick, you want to add in your 2 cents, feel free, please do. This is supposed to be a dialogue and a conversation, all right? So we'll start here. If you want to come up, and we'll just fire questions at Jerry and Nick and have them answer. And obviously, Tom and Ivan, if you guys have questions, just raise your hands and we'll get to you.
Hi, Jerry, and hi, Nick. Thanks for coming.
I want to just introduce yourself,
Yes.
what your major is.
I'm Adriana. I'm a senior. I'm a marketing major and an entrepreneurship minor. This question is for Jerry. I know that you wrote a couple of books about relationship, and I wanted to know what are some tips to build a relationship with people that we find hard to connect because we don't see a similarity with that person?
Yeah, Adriana, actually, I've written 3 books on this, and it's all about how do you build relationships with people you don't naturally connect with? Now, by my count, and this is just my estimation, we naturally connect with probably 25 to 30% of the people we meet. About 75% of the people we meet, we don't naturally connect with. And so the whole book is based on how do you actually connect with people that you don't naturally connect with? Well, it starts with your mindset. You know, one of the things that I was thinking about is Zev was talking, you know, he's thinking about me being on. Well, he finally asked me to be on. But one of the things I tell people, don't make decisions for other people. Don't decide that this person, because they're successful or because that you don't know them, that they wouldn't want to have a relationship with you. Because if your mindset says that you think they would want a relationship with you, you probably have got a much better shot of getting that relationship. The second thing is you got to learn if you want a relationship with somebody, let's say you don't know. So I'll give you an example. So Herb Sendek, who's a basketball coach at the University of Santa Clara, was the basketball coach at Arizona State. And I am a huge basketball junkie. I mentor 4 Division I college basketball coaches. Herb was actually the second coach that I started mentoring, but I didn't know Herb when I moved to Phoenix. All I knew was that he was the 4th youngest coach in the history of college basketball to 400 victories. He was the only coach in basketball, still is, that's been coach of the year in 3 major conferences, the MAC, the Pac-12, and the ACC. But I wanted to have an opportunity to interact with his kids. I wanted to teach his kids the relationship edge in business, which is the book you referenced. And I wanted to also teach them how to set and achieve stretch goals. So I didn't know him, but what I did do is there's a chapter in my book on pyramid hopping, which is how do you leverage the relationships you have to meet other people. And so I just simply asked everybody that I knew, well, how well do you know Herb Sendek, if at all? I asked 10 people. The 10th person said, I know him really well. I said, well, how comfortable would you be introducing me? Now, I didn't say, would you introduce me? I said, how comfortable would you be introducing me? And he said, you want to have breakfast with him next week? And I said, yes. And so I did. And I've been his mentor now for 13 years. I didn't know him. I was a nobody, still am a nobody. He's wildly famous. So you have to develop ways. But the fastest way to build a relationship with somebody is to find common ground and get them to talk about themselves. You know, I got on an airplane in Chicago one time with a guy named Larry Wingett. And if you don't know who Larry is, you probably ought to Google him because he's really good. But he had 2 big earrings. He had cowboy shirt, stars. He had starched blue jeans. He had purple cowboy boots. And the first thing he said to me when I sat down next to him was, I hate to talk to people on airplanes. Well, no one's ever said that to me before, but I said to myself, okay, you've written 3 best-selling books on relationship building. You should accept his challenge. So as we took off, I just said to him, I said, say, man, can I ask you a personal question? Now, if I were y'all, I'd write that down because that is a brilliant way to get somebody to talk about themselves. Say, can I ask you a personal question? Their curiosity will kill them. They'll be dying to find out. And you can ask, how'd you wind up in Waltham? How did you wind up at Bentley? You know, what did you do when you got here? I mean, there's lots of things you can ask. There's actually 20 questions you can ask that are in the book. But he said, so I said to myself, okay, I said, say, man, can I ask you a personal question? He said, sure. I said, haven't I seen you on television? He said, yeah, what'd you see me on? I told him. And he said, yeah, well, you know, I got a series on A&E called Hey Big Spender. Now it's 3.5 hours from Chicago to Phoenix. He talked for 3.5 hours. He never asked me my name. He didn't ask me what I did for a living. He asked me nothing about me. All I did was keep the conversation going. Now, for me, it was a bit of a game because what he said to me, I felt challenged. But when we landed, here's what he said to me. He said, say, man, where do you live? I said, well, I live right here in Scottsdale. And he said, you and I got to get together. You are the most interesting person I've ever met. Now, how the hell does he know I'm interested? He knows nothing about me. But what he does know is that I was interested in him. And so I think the answer to your question, Adriana, is be interested in other people. Never forget treat everybody like they're important because they are. And everybody, 99.9% of people are decent. And there's somebody's mother, brother, father, sister, cousin, aunt, uncle. Somebody loves them. And if somebody can love them, so can I. That's my advice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer.
I'm sorry. I'm sitting here shaking my head like a bobblehead because he said exactly, I mean, spot on truth. If you want to become interesting, you have to be interested in other people. If you show a level of interest, they may never say a single word or ask a single thing about you, but you showed a level of interest. This gentleman talked his ear off, and then at the end, boom, a relationship was developed because he showed a level of that. Jerry, that is money.
Awesome question.
Thank you.
Yvonne.
Hi, how are you? Thank you both for coming. I have a question. It's kind of 4 questions in one. What is the greatest tip you can give to a business owner if they're stuck with sales? How would you approach it? And what advice would you give to entrepreneurs?
Why don't you take that, Nick?
Yeah, the first part of the question was, what kind of advice would I give a business owner if they were stuck with sales? Stuck as in like they've plateaued, or stuck as in they feel like they're stuck, that's the only career option that they have?
No, like plateaued, like when there's no sales, like everything's flat and everything's like stuck in that way.
From a sports standpoint, spend a lot of money and win, then that cures everything. Just kidding. I would probably start with polling my current clientele and finding out what makes me a unique partner of theirs, why they use my services, why they like my services. I might grab a few quotes if I can, and then I would ask for some introductions. I would ask for some referrals, and just like Jerry said in the last segment, you know, in essence, not saying, hey, can you introduce me to, but saying, you know, what would it look like if you were to introduce me to XYZ? And those are warm introductions. It's still a cold call, if you will, because unless they're calling you to buy, it's almost always a cold call, right? So you got to find out, you know, what their needs are, and what results they're trying to drive as a business, and then how you can fit into that. But I think the first thing I would do is simply, you know, poll my current clients, find out what's unique about me, why they love working with me, ask them for some introductions, and then from there I would work off of that and then compound. I would even ask them what they hate about me. I better be ready for some tough love, but what do they hate about me that I can improve on? I think if you do that, then that will hopefully unstick you.
Yeah, I would throw in because first place, I love everything that Nick said. A couple of things I would say is, you know, every single one of you should learn what I'm about to say. This is Jerry's view of the world, and I've been wrong about a lot of stuff, but I ain't wrong about this. There's 2 things that you need to be successful, and I don't give a darn what you do, whether it's play Major League Baseball. And I had a pro baseball contract out of high school, but my coach told me I wasn't good enough, so I needed to go to college. But no matter what you do, you need 2 things. Number 1, you better be really good at it. So I would tell that person, get good at it. If you're not good at it, get good at it. And how do you get good at it? Number 1, everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs a coach and a mentor. I'm one of the top 10 sales experts in the world, supposedly have been for the last 6 or 7 years. I have 4 mentors. In fact, one of my employees, the guy who's president of my company, is one of my mentors. I count on him to give me advice and guidance when I get stuck. The second thing is you need a network of people that you being good at something matters. And so, you know, this is my 20th year with my company, and we've done business with 18 of the top 100 companies in the world. We have never advertised. We've gotten all of our business through relationships, through, you know, as Nick talked, referrals, what I would call pyramid hopping, which is fundamentally the same thing. But the other thing I would remember is, and Nick touched on this, which I think is great, when he said, ask what people like about you and what they hate about you. You know what that is? That's self-awareness. And the key, just my view of the world, the key to all growth and development is self-awareness. The problem is far too many people are not self-aware. They're not critical enough of themselves. So for example, I know I should not be the president of my company. It's not my skill set. So I gave that job to somebody else and I became CEO. The company's better off. I'm better off. He's better off. Everybody's better off. But if I hung on to my ego, I would say I want to be the president and CEO. Self-awareness is so critical. And so then where do you get self-awareness? Well, one place to get it is from a mentor. Another is to get it like Nick said, is to go seek the opinions of people that have done business with you. And that'll give you all the self-awareness you need. And it'll give you the things that you probably ought to be doing differently or better to be successful.
Thank you so much.
Great question, Yvonne. Tom, I see you. Vivi, I see you. Ivan, I see you, okay?
Okay, I'm not sure where to look, but hi guys. Thank you for coming. I kind of have I guess kind of a weird question, but also kind of personal. Speaking of being like self-aware, one thing I kind of struggle with is I'm kind of like restless and I move a lot. And I feel like in a sales situation, I don't know what to do with my body language or myself. Even being up here is like kind of a weird thing for me. So I guess I was just wondering from both of you guys, just like what is some advice is to, I guess, like not only be confident in yourself, but like, you know, what to do when you're with people, how to, you know, statue yourself and make yourself look like you know what you're talking about, I guess.
Nick?
You know, I think the first thing is you got to understand your product. That in itself is going to give you a little bit more self-confidence. If you know your product and you know what you're able to provide, that's going to give some reassurance that worst case scenario, I mean, absolutely, you go in and bomb this thing, you can at least, like last ditch effort, throw a lifeline and start talking about how great your product is and all the benefits that it gives you. Now, that's not the route you want to go. But if you understand your product better, then as you're having conversations with a current or potential client, you're keen as to what they're trying to achieve and how your product can fit. And you can make selling suggestions or buying suggestions to them and kind of guide the conversation. I think that's one huge thing that will send you in the right direction. Secondarily, I mean, I know we just hit on this, but the self-awareness and mentorship, man, get in front of a camera. If you present in person or do face-to-face meetings, get in front of camera or get in front of a mirror and make fun of yourself a little bit, you know, bomb it a little bit and assess your body language and feel what feels right, what feels wrong. And then if you're on the phone, record those conversations and play them back. You will be so critical of the way you sound that you have no other option to either quit or be Kobe Bryant and find a way to get better, right? Do those things, and I think that'll help you, you know, send in the right direction. At the end of the day, practice. Find a mentor, find a peer, and practice. And then once you start getting better at it, I would also encourage you to find someone to coach or teach, a mentee, someone that you can help kind of get over the things that you experience stress and frustration about.
Yeah, first place, I think all that is brilliant advice. I mean, first place, product knowledge is so crucial to your success because it gives you the confidence that there's nothing that they can ask you that you're not prepared for. And so that if your product knowledge is exquisite, then that's going to give you a built-in set of confidence. The other thing that Nick talked about, which I think is so important, and I think he said it a little differently than I did, but I think he probably said it better than I did. There's most sales are lost in the preparation. We're not prepared. We've not thought about, how am I going to open this call? You know, Michael Lunn, in his book, The Best Story Wins, says that you got 8 to 10 seconds in order to get somebody to tune in or tune out. And most people in the first 8 or 10 seconds are really boring. If you really plan on, how am I going to be interesting? How am I going to use what Brendan Kane in his book would call pattern interruption that makes me want to learn more? That's a really powerful thing to do, but prepare so that you feel so prepared. I mean, it's not much different than what Neil and his organization, does. They practice and prepare so much. Then when they get in the game situation, almost everything is intuitive, or it's habitual because they've done it before. And it's not like they're making it, they're not flying by the seat of their pants. The last two things I would say is that for me, necessity was a powerful growth pill. When I, wound up in the pharmaceutical business, I didn't have any choice but to succeed because I had a family, I had bills, I had flunked at my last job. I'd gotten rejected from graduate school at Northeast Louisiana University, which is hard to do. In fact, if you drive by there with your window down, they'll throw a diploma in your car. And so, I didn't have any choice but to succeed. But my good friend, Victoria LeBaum, just wrote a book about 6 months ago called Risk Forward. I highly recommend this book. But one of the things she says on page 62, which I think every single one of you that are young and starting out in the business world should remember, greatness rarely begins great. Greatness rarely begins great. So you'll get better at this the more you do it. You'll get better at this the more you practice it. You'll get better at this the more that you interact with other people that can give you ideas to help you be successful. So, don't worry about how good you are today. Be open to having a growth mindset to figure out what do you do to get better and better and better. Because let me tell you something, 20 years ago when I started this company, I was not great. I'm not sure I'm great today. I can tell you I've read 625 business books since 1981. And I've done that because I believe my old boss used to say, when you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you're rotting. And so I have always tried to continue to read, study, and learn. All of that stuff gives you confidence. So confidence solves all your nerve problems once you get kicked in the teeth.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's go, Vivi.
Thank you for both for coming. So I have a question to Jerry specifically. So I noticed you said you work as a leader, in implementing innovation ways to sell. So I'm just wondering what are the traditional ways to sell in today's market, and what is your innovation ways to sell?
Well, the first selling program was written in 1894 to actually sell cash registers. And if you read that, it's called the Patterson Principles. If you read the Patterson Principles, selling has not changed that much since 1894. Now, partly that's because human behavior hasn't changed that much. However, I'm actually writing my 5th book now with a guy named Jeremy Miner. And we actually call this book The New Era of Selling to the Unsellable Generation. What's really changed about selling, and my guess is Nick knows this as well, the internet and the voluminous amount of information that's available on the internet has made it very easy for people to make decisions about buying before they ever talk to a salesperson. And so, what salespeople have to do, in my mind, and this is very consistent with, the definition of selling that Zev showed in that video, is you have to be a problem finder and a problem solver. Oftentimes, the customer doesn't understand what their problem is. And if you ask great questions, you actually can uncover it. So I think the big thing about the way I look at sales today and the innovation that I have is, I introduced customer centric selling into the pharmaceutical industry in 1984. So that's an awful long time ago. I can tell you, having worked with many, many companies, most of them are not very good at it. They are still in the product pushing business. They're still in the pitching business. They're still in telling them what to do business. Our bias is that since most people don't know what they want, but they think they do, you really need someone who can identify where the problems and the gaps are that they're not able to see. The other thing you have to remember is that, and this I think is different, and it's been a learning for me over the last year. Yeah, I used to think that the salesperson was in charge of the sale. You're really not. The person in charge of the sale is the customer. What we're in charge of is the conversation. And if you get people to understand that the way you orchestrate the conversation, how you use tonality, how you get past the gatekeeper, how you actually begin to develop rapport and trust, because trust is so important. As Zev said that, at the very beginning of this class, how important it is to build that relationship and that trust. The way you do that is not be like everybody else. Now, I tell people, if you want 2 words that'll tell you how to be wildly successful in selling, be different. Now, I didn't say be weird. That's a different issue. Be different. If you go and if you've read Chip and Dan Heath's book, Made to Stick, they teach about the concept of schema. Schema is a pattern of thinking. And so when we recognize a pattern of thinking, we immediately know exactly what to do. So if I walk into a customer and say, hi, my name's Jerry Acuff, and I work with Delta Point, and we work with market leaders and sales leaders to help them be successful, that's what everybody else does. And so if I do that, what happens is the customer will recognize that, and you will encounter unintentionally and inadvertently sales resistance. But if you go in and say, and this is one of the things that I teach my coaches about recruiting, when that prospect says to the coach, why should I come to your school? Now, I can promise you that 99.9% of all coaches have a spiel that they give about why you should come to Duke, or why you should go to UMass, or why you should go to VMI, or whatever. I teach coaches don't do that. Because if you do that, you sound like everybody else. Here's what you say. Now, obviously, if you're sitting in somebody's living room, whether it's a female soccer player that you're trying to recruit, or whether it's a lacrosse player, or whether it's a football player, or basketball player, and that person says, why should I come to UMass? Or why should I come to Bentley? My answer is going to be, I'm not sure you should. Because they ain't never heard that before. And they're going to say, well, what do you mean? And I'm going to say, well, look, the reality is I'm here because we really like for you to think about our university, but I don't know enough about you and about what we're looking for in our program in terms of not only your attitude, but your expectations before I could ever say to you that we're right for you. So I'm going to need to ask you some questions to understand if there's a fit or not. And I guarantee you'll be the only person that does that, because everybody else just gives a spiel. And so I think you got to be different. And I think what we talk about in our new book, which is what I've been talking about forever, is that you can't think like a customer if you don't know what the customer thinks. And the reality is most customers stop short of telling you what they really think because they don't trust you yet. So your tonality matters. I mean, if you read Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, he talks about the most powerful tool you have in selling is your voice. And you need to pause more. If you talk fast, people don't think that they're being heard. And so there's lots of small things, but all of those small things are the things that differentiate you from everybody else, that the average person in selling has simply been trained the wrong stuff. That's my bias, Vivi.
Thank you. It's a great answer. I have learned a lot. Thank you.
Hi, Jerry and Nick. My question kind of piggybacks off of failure, but more, Jerry, you talked about being introverted and how that led you to fail your first sales call and you flunked out of your job. Do you feel in your life you've overcome being introverted? Do you still feel in your day-to-day job that you tend to still have those moments where you have to almost give yourself a pep talk to go into that? Because I feel I'm introverted, maybe not to a crazy extent, but I still do feel that there's sometimes I do have to think of stuff before I do it in order to do it. Can you touch on failure, how you overcame being that introverted, and how you come to the point that you are in your life now?
Well, in first place, I don't think I ever overcome being introverted. I will tell you that just if you want to, there's a video or two on YouTube about me talking about why introverts make better salespeople than extroverts. And let me tell you why introverts make better salespeople than extroverts. Number one, introverts are far more interested in the other person than they are themselves. The second thing is introverts are way, way, way better listeners. And they're far more likely to use curiosity to actually understand what the customer thinks. The fourth thing, which I think goes back to what Zev said early on, they are remarkable builders, relationship builders. And so in my mind, in fact, I'll tell you that the vast majority of people that I know that make seven figures in selling are introverts. They're not extroverts. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be successful as an extrovert, because I certainly know you can. But I think introverts, you got to remember this, selling is a thinking person's game. And introverts are better at thinking than extroverts. Extroverts are better at talking, usually. Now, if you find an extrovert who's willing to sort of put the governor on and really start thinking about what does it take to be successful, you can be successful. So I don't think I've ever overcome being introverted. What I've learned is that I have a lot of confidence that I'm always trying to do the right thing. And to me, the right thing oftentimes, probably 6, 7, 8 times a year, is to tell somebody that I'm not the right person for you, but I know who is, and I connect them. Because I do believe that when I say, we're not for everybody, I mean that. And it usually shocks people. I mean, I had a guy who was going to pay me $20,000 to go to Dallas. I could have gone and seen Nick. But he wanted me to teach 15 people. And I know he told me what his revenue was. I'm thinking, I'm going to charge you guy $20,000. He's going to have to pay my expenses, which are another 3 or 4. I said, I wouldn't hire me. I said, first place, I know a guy in Dallas. His name is Tim Wackel. He doesn't have a book, but he's as good a sales trainer as there is in America, certainly as good as I am. And so I asked the guy when he called to finalize the deal. And I said, look, man, are you open to another option? He said, yeah. And I said, well, look, I wouldn't hire me if I were you. And he said, why? I said, because I think it's too much money for your company. He said, no, but we've reconciled that. I said, I know, but I haven't. And I said, honestly, there's a guy in your backyard, and I called him before I called you to see if he was available this day and if he would do it for half the price I would. He will. Do you want his number, or do you want to still give me the contract? It's your decision. And he said, I want his number. And he got the business. I never heard from the guy again. I didn't care, because I think you have to be true to yourself. And when you do that, you can do that as an introvert. You can do that as an extrovert. But introverts are simply people that are more naturally focused on other people. And that's why I think, now that Daniel Pink in his book, To Sell is Human, he says that the most successful people are what's called ambiverts, AMBIVERT, which are people that are sort of on the borderline of introvert and extrovert. And I probably fall on that, grid. But I think introverts make wildly successful people. And as long as they can get past their preconceived notion that introverts don't have the personality to be successful in selling, they can be wildly successful just by being their authentic self. And I tell every audience I talk to, whether it's 5,000 or 5, the most important thing you can do is be your authentic self. Whenever you try and be somebody else, you will always fail. Be yourself.
Thank you.
Runway.
Oh, yes. Hi. I have previously worked in China in real estate sales. So I was confused when I faced a customer who rejected me completely, and I didn't know how to continue the conversation with them. So my question for both of you is that how to deal with the customer who has completely rejected you, and how to keep in touch with them.
Nick, you probably deal with that more than I do.
Part of the thing is you're going to get rejected, and sometimes you're going to get rejected completely. I mean, if you're not, then my gosh, you're God's gift to selling. But you should expect that, and you should be. The way I deal with it mentally, and this is part of kind of preparing your mind for that, is, hey, no big deal. He doesn't necessarily deserve to work with my awesomeness anyway. and I'm gonna kind of move on and debrief myself on what I did right and what I did wrong. Now, does that mean I'm not going to reattack that customer or try to find a different way? A lot of times, I think the people that reject you just straight out, they're probably not the decision maker anyways, in many cases. Most decision makers are used to listening to sales pitches and making decisions and doing it pretty fast. So maybe you find a different avenue into that company or that place of business that is more aligned with your product and what you're trying to sell. I mean, I would reattack that same person. I would take I'm a little bit introverted myself. And you don't ever overcome that. I tell people all the time, if you don't want to be invited to weddings, don't have any friends. And that's because I don't mean that straight up, don't have any friends. I like my alone time. I cherish my alone time to think. I cherish my family time with my wife and kids. And I say no to a lot of social settings because I am a little bit introverted myself. But I think you just look at it and you have to assess why you think they might have rejected you, or flat out ask them, you know, what is it that has you telling me no? I would like to learn more because you may help me. Ask for help. You may help me down the road. I may not be, like Jerry said, we may not be a great fit for you, but you may know somebody who is. Worst case scenario, I walk away from this and you helped teach me something. People inherently usually like to help people. They like to help other people. And so ask that question.
Yeah, I don't think I can add much to Nick. I think it's brilliant advice. It is one of the things I did hear one time. It's the foremost powerful words in the English language is "I need your help."
Yeah.
And I think Nick alluded to that. The other thing I would tell you, I lost a $350,000 sale last Friday, so I wasn't completely shunned, Runwin, but you know, to lose a $350,000 sale that I was 98.9% sure we would make, I had to do exactly what Nick said. I got to go back and say, what did I do wrong? And so actually there were three of us on the phone talking to 6 or 7 people there, and we didn't prepare correctly. I wasn't ready for what they were going to do. I made the assumption because we had this relationship with the decision maker that we would get the business. So we're now going to have a debrief on Monday and talk about how do we make sure that doesn't happen again, because that rejection wasn't their fault. It was my fault. And so this goes back to exactly what Nick said, is to sort of go back and say, what could you have done differently? Now, I love his idea about going back and say, look, you know, I really would like to get your help. If you don't want to see me, that's fine. But can you at least give me some ideas about some things I could do differently that might get me access to other people? People love, as Nick said, they love to teach and they love to help. But looking inward is the key.
Thank you.
So my question is specifically for Nick. I read in your bio that in 2014 you swapped from sales to management, and that really struck me because I currently am kind of in that position where I did do a sales internship. Now I'm looking towards management. I feel very 50-50 about it. So I was just wondering, the pros and cons in your mind like management compared to sales, if you have any personal advice for me on how to choose which one.
If you want my personal advice, start in sales. And the reason I say that is because in sales, if you can learn how to sell, you'll always have a job. And at the end of the day, learning how to sell, you're dealing with a vast array of personalities and people that you can sell to, which will in turn help broaden your tool belt as a manager. Having skins in the game help as a manager. Life experience helps as a manager. I don't think there's cons to both, right? And there's pros to both. If I was to say, what is a pro to selling? You're in control of your destiny. It's you versus everyone else. And it's really like a baseball team, right? You win as a team or you win as an organization, but you as the left fielder might have made the play. You as the salesperson might have made the play that pushed your company over the threshold that they needed to hit for their yearly goal or their yearly quota or whatever it is. So there's a lot of individuality to selling, but you are part of a greater team and a greater cause. When it comes to management, you have to steer the greater cause. And you have to have a lot more selflessness. Quite frankly, you better be really selfless. And there are times that it will be an absolute frustrating experience being a manager. We talked early on before we got too deep in this, you're going to deal with so many different personalities, and you got to be able to understand why Nick Richardson did this way and why Jerry isn't going to do it that way ever. But you have to work with Jerry's skill set in order to make Jerry successful, because the sales principles are exactly the same, but the personality and the who they are is completely different. You have to find a way to help them hone their craft to be successful. And if you can't do that, then you won't be an effective manager. Not being an effective manager, that's a con. But there are pros and cons to each. The biggest pro to being a manager is taking someone who has zero experience, giving them an opportunity, mentoring, coaching, and developing them, giving them as much advice as possible, and then watching them succeed, watch them get promoted, and then watch them be a provider for their family and create a wonderful lifestyle for themselves and their family. That's a pro to being a manager. But I think there's many steps before you get to that point that you really need to understand people. And quite frankly, I think sales is one of the best professions to get you there.
Perfect. Thank you for your answer.
Ivan. Yeah, hello. My question is for Jerry, and I learned in your bio that you've gone to Virginia Military Institute, and military is quite universal because I've served as well, and it's pretty strict and vertical, and you probably have learned that you should never question your commander's orders, do everything, say everything as you're told according to the handbook, which makes your mind pretty blocked. And selling, as you mentioned, is a thinking process, which is pretty much the opposite, where you can fail, you can try out different things which you cannot do in the military. My question is, how did you transform your approach and mindset in the beginning while when you started working in sales?
Well, I was never, when I went to VMI, when I went there, we had 1,200 students, they were all male. And it was, a very Spartan environment, very rigid, very disciplined, etc. I was not a great student. I was on academic probation 6 of the 8 semesters I was there. And so that they did give me rank my second semester, my senior year, because the guy who was the commandant wanted me to go in the Army because he said I was a leader. And I said, yeah, but I'm not the kind of leader who's going to be very good in the Army. So I knew myself that I wasn't right for the Army. The good news is I didn't really have to go in the Army, but for 90 days because they had too many officers in the Vietnam War. But I learned a lot in the military that did transfer, I think, to my business. And that is, and Nick talked about this, which I think is really important. You got to learn to deal with people. And when you're in a military environment, there's people you hate, there's people you love, there's people you could care less if you ever see them again. And your success is really dependent on how you interact with each of those segments. And so I learned a lot about how do you actually learn to deal with people that you don't really care a lot about or don't know much about. And I think the military prepared me for that. The other thing that's interesting about VMI, when I got hired, I would never have hired me. I woke up one day running the company. I was, I ran a $650 million company, started as a rep, and then woke up one day running the company. And I asked the guy who hired me, I said, why did you hire me? I would never have hired me. I was a manager for 8 years. I had the #1 district out of 70, 7 out of 8 years. 13 of the 20 people I hired got promoted. But I said, I would never have hired me. He said, let me tell you why I hired you. I hired you because you went to BMI. He said, and I said to myself, if that guy goes to BMI, he's reasonably smart and he can communicate, he'll be a success in our business. Because what he knew was that the discipline that you learn in the military and the relationship building you learn in the military with people you don't naturally connect with carries over into everything you do. And I will tell you, 2 of my closest friends, one's a 2-star general who's now the superintendent at VMI. The other one is a 4-star general who was in charge of Cent Command. And these are 2 of the brightest, greatest business minds I've ever met in my life. And they learned every bit of it in the Army. So I think that while there's a lot of rigidity in the Army, there's also a lot of strategic thinking. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of developing people for promotion. It's such a microcosm of what the real world is like. I think people misjudge what you get out of it based on my experience. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Thank you.
Great question, Ivan. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Jerry and Nick. I'm Jessie. And I did have a question about being an introvert. So thank you, Jerry, for already answering that. But my other question is specifically for Nick, and it kind of has multiple parts. But so the first part is working in like sports sales. Who would you say is your typical customer or client? And then would you say like you're like a normal person, or if there's like, I don't know, like a certain organization or a group of people that you focus on? And then where do you find your customers or clients? And with that, when trying to find them, have you ever found yourself where you can't find any? And if so, where do you look to find more customers?
Perfect. Are they breathing?
Yes.
Then they're a potential customer. A lot of people think that you have to be a sports fan to be a season ticket member or be a suite rental customer or be a group buyer. Let me give some examples of church youth group, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Heritage Night, Hispanic Heritage Night, Italian Heritage Night. There's a variety of different things that you can incorporate the sale of tickets to games, group tickets in particular, school groups, high school baseball, little league baseball, softball. Heck, you can sell to youth football teams. There's a variety of different avenues that you can go to sell tickets. So I don't think there's a cap on necessarily who can be a customer. We're not selling a technology that can only be used, like payroll technology. It's all, you got to be a business to use that. You're not an individual, right? I'm not buying payroll technology so I can figure out how I will pay my kids their allowance, which they don't get one, right? So with sports, there's not a cookie cutter perfect fit for a client. Kind of what we look for is there an opportunity? Let me give an example. A church group, right? What is a church as a business trying to do? Because yes, it is a business. I mean, they're trying to save souls, right? But what is a church's business? To increase attendance, to increase their membership, right? Well, how do you increase their membership? Well, by inviting people to come to church. And if any of you go to church, you know how uncomfortable it can be to invite someone to go to church, right? Well, what's a great way to increase attendance? Have your youth or adult group come to a baseball game, invite your friend to the baseball game with your church group, and now all of a sudden you're in a more comfortable social setting with your church group, and hopefully they have some enjoyment being around the people they're there with. And then that hopefully makes your invite to bring them to church a little bit easier, right? So it's a more comfortable setting. And a lot of folks say, well, why don't you just take, from a business standpoint, why don't you take your client to dinner, to a nice steak dinner? How many people are getting taken to a nice steak dinner? A lot. Jerry, how many times have you been invited to go to a nice steak dinner because somebody's trying to sell you something? A lot. And what do? You sit across the table from them and you look at one another and you have conversation. Well, the unique thing about baseball is you sit knee to knee beside one another and you watch something that, whether you're a fan or not, can produce emotions that help break down walls and build a level of interest between you and that potential customer. So as a business, I'm looking at it as a more unique way to engage a customer that I'm potentially trying to sell something, or say thank you to a customer that I've already sold something to, and hopefully build that relationship even deeper. When it comes to like a suite sell standpoint, a lot of what we're looking at is customer engagement, or similar to the season ticket buy, you're also doing employee engagement. And so I want to reward my employees for hitting their sales quota, or I want to reward my employees for going, 365 days injury-free on a job site. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to host a suite where they can invite their family out there. And so their family feels rewarded. So when their family buys into the company being safe and creating a safe environment for their husband or wife to work at, then therefore they're a champion for the company and what our goals are. And that's a safe work environment in a potentially dangerous hard hat zone or whatever it may be. There's a variety of ways you can look at it. Referrals are and recommendations are a massive way to grow. We have a call-in line where people call in to buy tickets. We also have a internet chat where people can chat with people online, and then we have interest forms online where people can fill out what they're interested in. Those are ways that people can come to us, right? So what are we doing to supplement that? I can tell you one thing. When I was a senior account executive, I never once in a 4 or 5 year period got on the call-in line. And I still outsold everyone because I developed quality relationships. I maintained excellent repeat business, and I would get referrals. And the greatest compliment I think a salesperson can get is an unsolicited referral. That's somebody, they love you and champion you so much that they want to tell people about it. And that's a way to capture additional business. And then if all else fails, you're going to do prospecting. I mean, we have a tool called Zoom Info that we use that you can go on and you can search different companies or like companies, people that you already do business with or people you sold. You can look up those, and within a radius of 50 miles, 100 miles, 10 miles, you can look up their yearly revenue. You can look up a variety of things that will categorize these companies and give you direct contact information for decision makers within the company. And so you just do research, and you do a little extra research on the front end. Once you find a name, look them up on LinkedIn, find out a little bit about them, and then make a phone call. I also use Google Maps. I will sell something. Just say I sold something to Jerry. I know Jerry's address because it's in our ticket system, right? So I'm gonna Google Maps Jerry's address, and I'm gonna zoom out from it, and I'm gonna see what businesses are in the vicinity of Jerry, and I'm gonna either go see them or I'm gonna call them, and I'm gonna say, hey, we just did something with Jerry, your neighbor over there. I would love to visit with you and find out a little bit about more, a little bit more about your goals for the company and what you're trying to achieve. And let's see if there's an opportunity that I and the Rangers can help develop those results to champion whatever your goals are.
Okay, thank you.
A good steak dinner is always good. I would never not take a full. Yeah.
I won't say no.
Dukes.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to thank you both for everything tonight. This has all been fantastic. My name is Tom Duggan. I'm a professional sales major here at Bentley. So this one's for Jerry. So I read your bio. I saw that you won Salesman of the Year twice during your time at Hoax Cell Pharmaceuticals. So just kind of curious, what kind of things do you do in order to sort of separate yourself from the others to ultimately kind of earn that achievement and also build that foundation to get you where you are today?
Well, thanks for that question, Tom. I think I was coachable, number one, and I had a great coach. And the second thing is I worked hard, and I got really good at figuring out what was the most important thing for me to do, which was decide where to spend my time. And so I got really good at understanding who are the people who could change my life. And I will tell you that in sales, that's not ordinarily a huge number. It's probably a huge number in Nick's business, but it's not in mine. If I have 100 people, I actually have an app that is free called Really Linked. Who do you really want to be linked into? I have 16,000 connections on LinkedIn. If you ask me how many of those 16,000 are crucial to my success, that number is about 100. And the app enables me to stay in touch with them on a consistent, persistent, relevant basis because I assume they're all in my phone. But I got really good at figuring out, number one, who should I spend most of my time with? Because one of the things that salespeople don't really understand is the most valuable resource you have is your time. And, I was reading the draft of my book today, and there's a story in there about somebody who called me and asked for advice. And people will call me, probably once or twice a week, and they'll tell me, what's going on and what they want me to tell them what to do. And this guy's still talking about an office that had 17 doctors, and they weren't using this product, but he had 4 or 5 of them that were really interested in using the product. But the woman who was the receptionist was against the product. She liked the other company, etc. And she was the wife of the person who was the most important person in that office. So his question was, I'm going to go around her and I'm going to get all these other people to say they want my product. And we're this, I'm sure this will, and I said, first place, man, you're nuts. I said, this woman ain't never buying from you. I said, if you want her to buy from you, go build a relationship with her. But you go around her, you're wasting every minute of every second that you spend trying to convince people to go against the decision maker. It's stupid. So number one, figure out who can change your life. Number two, study, learn about selling. One of the things that I learned a long time ago, Gerhard Schwantner told me one time, he said, the more I learn about selling, the more I learn there is to learn. And so I think what you do is you keep learning about selling. You keep reevaluating what you could do differently, what you could do better. And I also think it's really important to find a mentor, find a coach, somebody that you can lean on, somebody that you like, trust, respect, and admire, that'll help you. I had that with my very first boss. And the other thing I would say to you, and this is a whole different subject, when you go out and get a sales job, you better damn well interview whoever's hiring you. You better interview them. You better find out, how good are you at developing people? How are you going to develop me? How many people have you promoted? What's the likelihood that there's advancement in this company? Because I can tell you, there's an awful lot of people that will hire you that have no interest in developing. They want to use you to make themselves successful. You want to go to work for somebody who actually has developed people and is not afraid to let them go because they have potential. And, you know, there's a really interesting book that I would highly recommend you read called The People Principle by Ron Willingham. It's only one chapter that's worth a damn in it. And that's, I think, chapter 4 or 5, where he talks about the 3 dimensions of human performance. And what he talks about is that the way the coach impacts somebody like you or me is they change our view of ourselves. So for example, when I was 37 years old, you know, my life's dream, I came up in a very poor family. I wanted to be a regional manager. Regional manager, you know, in the pharmaceutical business makes $150 a year. You know, I figured I could do that for 15 or 20 years and retire. And I lost an opportunity to be a regional manager, but my boss, who actually got the job, said this to me the night he got the job. He said, "Look, Jerry," he said, "you should have got this job, not me. You're more qualified than I am, but I'm not going to give the job back. So get over." He said, "But let me tell you this." He said, "This job is not big enough for you. You need to be running our company." And I can promise you, Tom, from that night was the first time in my life I ever thought about running a pharmaceutical company. And 5 years later, I was running that pharmaceutical company. Because what he did, because he was a great leader, he changed my view of me. And what all of us need in our life is a catalyst that'll change our view of what we are capable of becoming. And I think that's the best advice I can give you. You know, just get a good mentor, go to work for somebody that you believe in, that you know wants to make you successful, and then work your tail off. Keep learning. If you do those things, you'll be wildly successful.
Thanks a lot, Jerry.
All right, it's 9:01 p.m. I promised these students here that they'd be out by 9:10. Gives me about 4 minutes, give or take, for the last few questions that we have. So can we do this in rapid fire fashion? Is that okay with you two for the last couple minutes? Jerry, is that okay? All right. So why don't you guys come on up that have questions remaining? We'll rapid fire them, and then 9:05, we'll stop.
Hey, Jerry and Nick, my name is Zach, and a lot of us in this class are juniors and seniors, so we're kind of applying to like internships and jobs. For me, I think the hardest part of that is the actual application process and not the interview process, just because I trust in like my charisma to get me through that interview process. So how do you guys make yourselves seem valuable or get your foot in the door when all you can do is email somebody or communicate with someone using just simply words and you can't talk to them face to face?
You want to take that, Nick?
Yeah, I would say stop using foot in the door, first of all. To show them and demonstrate to them that you want a career with them. Secondarily, do what a salesperson would do. Just as an example, I get, for every single job opening, I get about 400 applicants. I don't have time to go through that. But if your resume is garbage, I will still give you a chance to interview if you reach out to me and do what a salesperson does. Because guess what? I'm hiring salespeople. So be the job before you get the interview. Do what the job is requiring of you and reach out and actually try to build a relationship.
Yeah, I would tag onto that real quickly. One is if you've actually tried to get a job somewhere and they've turned you down, the easiest place to get a job is go back to them. And so I can tell you that I hired, 20 people. I turned 3 people down, but all three of those people that I turned down, and I turned down 987 people. 3 of the 987 came back to me and told me I'd made a mistake, and I hired every single one of them. And so why did I hire them? Because as a salesperson, just like Neil said, I'm looking for somebody who won't take no for an answer, is persistent and does things the right way. So I think if you can't get in that way, number one, try and find somebody to introduce you, but don't be afraid to go back to them over and over and over again. We're looking for people in sales that are persistent without being pushy.
Yeah, Jerry, I couldn't agree. I've hired 5 people that I've turned down once before. One is still on my team. The other 4 have been promoted, and every single one that's been promoted have sold premium contracted product with us, which is a big deal.
Thank you, guys.
Hey guys, my name's Jake. My question is primarily for Nick. So working for the Texas Rangers, I'm sure there are some times where other outside factors can get in the way of you trying to sell your whatever you're trying to sell. So my question for you is, how do you like sort of navigate how the team's doing and how the overall franchise is doing? How are you able to like sort of still get the message out to your customers when inevitably the team's ebbs and flows, like the performance of the team ebbs and flows?
I just think you have to never sell team performance. Stay organized, know the people that like team performance so that you can shoot the fish in a barrel whenever your team does get good, because they're still in your contact Rolodex. But at the end of the day, you're not focused on team performance. You're focused on what your facility, for us, Globe Life Field, can provide that customer through the avenue of professional baseball.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any parting words, gentlemen, to 32 individuals that are thirsty for knowledge? Any lasting words that you can leave on these kids as they go off tonight and go on in their careers?
Yeah, the only thing I would suggest is please read The Power of Consistency by Weldon Long. It is a book that everybody in the world should have to read. It's about how do you create a prosperity plan, and you do it by being consistent. I mean, if you listen to Nick, it's clear that he's consistent as he can possibly be. And also, he thinks about his business. If you read the Power of Consistency, he will teach you how to create a prosperity plan that'll make you a millionaire if you want to be one.
Love that, man. I'm going to buy Jerry's books here pretty soon, so I will.
Don't do that. Send me an email. I'll send them to you, Nick. I'll sign them and send them to you.
I love that. Man, there is truly no greater thing than self-development. There's just not. And that's reading. That's taught. Get used to reading. If you're not used to reading and you hate reading or you read slow, guess what? You only get better by doing. So do it. Listen to a podcast, watch some YouTube videos, listen to the people around you, get a mentor like Jerry's mentioned multiple times. And then once you get to a point where you're having success, begin to mentor others as well. One of my favorite quotes is by an MMA fighter, which I could give 0 cares about MMA, but the quote is really on point. It's by Frank Shamrock, who was an MMA champion. He said, every fighter to be great needs to have someone better to learn from. That's your mentor. They need to have someone lesser to teach. That's your mentee. And they need to have someone equal that they can challenge themselves against. That's your competition. That's your peers. And I can tell you guys one thing. When you find someone that you can coach, you will grow as fast as anything, because all the things that your mentor has taught you that sometimes doesn't quite sink in, as you begin to relay that information to someone else, all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, this is true. This works. It will gain or grow your self-confidence. And I think if you do those things, you're only sky's the limit. And then kind of the last thing that I don't know where this quote came from, but it's something I just found that I loved, is never say that's not my job. First, it oozes arrogance. It oozes laziness. But at the end of the day, if you help and you chip in even when it's not your responsibility, and you just find a way to get it done, you're going to find plenty of growth opportunities in that experience. And I don't care what you call me. I have a VP title here with the Rangers. Guess what? I'm the one that goes and cleans the storage room to make sure it's organized for our reps. I don't care. I want the best selling opportunity for our people. And if I'm not setting the standard and the example, then where else are they going to get it from? Probably somebody I don't trust. So I better be the one setting the standard and the example.